think about what we're talking about here. Those are very real life scenarios of people walking in with contamination on their clothes that they're now going in and doing surgery on you. And I sure don't want that. I don't want your cat hair in my surgical wound. So please change into fresh scrubs that were laundered here if you're doing surgery on me.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On this week's episode of First Case, we're speaking with Jill Holdsworth, Manager of Infection Prevention at Emory University Hospital Midtown in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're going to be speaking about a very common topic, and it's one where sometimes the rules are a little blurry, they might be different from facility to facility, and they might get bent or broken with some regularity. And we're talking about PPE. A thing that we're all very familiar with, but sometimes get frustrated with depending on the rules. What do we wear? Why do we wear it? Why do we have to change? Or why is this new rule being implemented? We're going to be talking all the things today with Jill. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Jill Holdsworth.
Hi, I'm Chris Blevins.
And I'm Melanie Perry.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to First Case.
Joining us now is Jill Holdsworth, Manager of Infection Prevention at Emory University Hospital Midtown in Atlanta, Georgia. And Jill, you've been a guest before, so welcome back to the studio.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
It is a pleasure to get to talk to you again. And today we are going to be talking about something that we hear about from our IPs all the time. We're talking about PPE, but we're also going to be talking about the why behind wearing what we do and those rules about when to wear it and when not to. So, of course, you were the perfect person to ask to talk about this. But before we get started, everyone does not know you. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Thanks so much. So my background is a little non-traditional. So anybody that is looking to get into infection prevention, it doesn't matter where you come from or where you started. My background is a biology degree with a master's in exercise physiology. So I am super non-traditional in the IP world. I don't have a nursing degree. I don't have an MPH. I don't have all of the things that you think of for IPs. I was a cardiac rehab therapist and kind of fell into this role. I love it. And a few years after I was in this role, I became certified in sterile processing. I also became an EMT. I volunteered at night. I still am an active EMT. And I just got my CHL through HSPA, which is another leadership certification through sterile processing. So I just keep chugging along. I'm a lifetime learner. I love this field. I love the OR. I love SPD. It's a constantly challenging world, and love being here to keep talking about it.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, you talking about your career path just kind of goes back to another conversation we had seasons ago when we were talking about just professional growth. And your career path isn't linear necessarily. You don't have to follow one certain path to get to where you're going. And you are the living embodiment of maybe taking a different route, but you have really dedicated yourself to this profession and you know a lot. And so I'm super excited to have this conversation. And I want to just really start at the beginning. PPE. What is it that we're talking about?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Maybe somebody is listening that has no idea what we're even saying. Like, what is this PPE stuff we're even saying? So personal protective equipment. And in different professions, that means very different things, like a Camino hard hat. Of course, that's not what we're talking about right now. But when we're in the OR, we are talking about a lot of different things. So we are talking about your basic gown, gloves, and depending on what your role is in the OR, you're going to be wearing, different things. It also can mean you might be wearing an N95 at times, which I know probably during COVID, we all got tired of N95s and nobody wants to see one ever again.
Nope.
But you still have to use them for certain things. And the one that I think that we kind of forget about sometimes is eye protection. And then we have your surgical gowns. And so there's a lot of variety of different things that we're talking about here. And this is not only for your protection, it's for your patient's protection. It's for other people's protection. So, you can be a little selfish for some of these things because you want to protect yourself. But ultimately, we are also there for the patients. And that's our number one thing. So we want to make sure that we're protecting the patients from our skin, from our hair, from all of the things that we're putting our PPE over.
I think that you bring up a really good point. And because PPE, yes, it's personal, right? It's personal protection, but it's my protection and their protection through what I'm wearing. And I think, honestly, though, I think there's a switch sometimes when we think about wearing some of these to, because we need to, for patient safety, for sterility, for all this stuff. And we forget that some of this stuff really is designed and implemented for our own protection. Let's take eye protection, for example. We have proper eye protection at our scrub sinks. Every time I've been in an OR, I see it there. But then a lot of times you see people choosing to wear their glasses instead. Mm-hmm. Is that effective eye protection?
No. And I think that's one of the common misconceptions. I really hope that during COVID, maybe we learned this a little more than we had in the past, but your eyeglasses are not eye protection. What eye protection consists of is something that goes on the top all the way to your brow, and you have to have side protection. So, and I know that they did make some like super uncool looking snap-on things that you can put on your eyeglasses.
Yeah.
I didn't see many people that chose to have these on their eyeglasses, but if you found the top inside snap-ons for your eyeglasses, that could work. But if you do wear eyeglasses, you do have to wear some sort of another type of eye protection over top of it. So whether that would be a shield that goes all the way over top, or there are some kind of goggles and other eye protective lenses that can slide over top of your glasses so that it's still comfortable. But you do have to have the side and top eye protection because droplets and other things can come on the sides and over top. So when you think about what are you protecting from, droplets don't know the difference. They don't know that you have on glasses. So it's not just going to come from one direction and come straight on and hit your lenses. They're going to come from all different directions, especially when you're irrigating. And I'll never forget this. I'll tell you a quick personal story. When I was a baby IP and I was seeing an orthopedic surgery that was a washout, and I remember the circulator giving me a pair of eye protection. And I'm thinking like, I don't need this. Why do I have to? And I was standing kind of like at the foot of the patient. And I mean, there was fluid flying everywhere and it was just hitting the front of those glasses left and right. And I was like standing so still because I was like, oh my God, I am going to be sick. Like, this is so disgusting. What is hitting my glasses?
Right.
And that is happening all over that room. And some of it you see and some of it you don't see.
Yes, it's terrifying.
Yes. And that's going in your eyes, your nose, your mouth, anything that's not protected. Think about all of the things that you don't see that's going in every mucous membrane that is not covered. And
I know. And
that's the reality of it.
If we're just going to swap gross stories, I had a surgeon that I worked with years ago, and he would do total joints without the hood, without the stuff. He would just wear his mask and his gown, and he had eyeglasses, and he wore his eyeglasses. And I would see him after the case, and he would have little red speckles all over his glasses, or he'd have it on his forehead or on his cheek, or he might even get something gross splashed on him, and he'd come over to me and be like, hey, can you wash this off my face real quick? And I'm like, ugh. I mean, there's a reason we wear hoods and totals, but even still, you think of those eyeglasses, like you said, the splashes don't care where the glasses are. They might go over, under. Sometimes I just want to like do some swab tests on some of these guys who think it's okay to not wear all the protection. But that's another story for another day. Anyway, the point is, that seeing all that splash on his glasses really makes you understand why it's so important to not just have where the glasses are, but above the brow, below the eyes, around the sides, to really protect your eyes from any angle when something is splashing.
I mean, eyes are such a vulnerable thing. It's like a super highway for bacteria, viruses, anything to just go straight in. I mean, you rub your eyes with a dirty hand, you've just introduced bacteria right into your eyes. I mean, it's one of the easiest ways to get exposed because it's just an open mucous membrane right there for anything to splash right in. And that's why it's so important to clean your hands too after you've been dealing with something dirty, because we're always rubbing our eyes and scratching our eyes. Same thing with your nose. You rub your nose right after you dipped your hand into something dirty. Same thing. You have to be so aware when you're in the OR because there's so many things that are contaminated in there, and you have to be so aware of your hands and all the mucous membranes that you're touching.
Exactly. Well, and you think too, and this will actually tie into the next one we're about to talk about, is scrubs, right? So you think, oh, my hands are dirty. I might just go wipe my nose on my arm real quick or something, or on my shoulder. But our scrubs also get exposed to all the stuff that's splashing around, that's going around in the room, and they are vectors for infection. They carry different germs. But one of the things about scrubs that, I don't know, I find concerning, I don't understand why is this so hard? Hospital laundered scrubs. The hospital provides the scrubs. I'm not supposed to wear the scrubs in. I'm supposed to change my clothes and wear the scrubs at the hospital. And then when the case or surgery or shift is over, I'm supposed to change my clothes and go home in something clean. Seems simple. And yet, time and time again, people just wear their scrubs home and then wear them back in. Why do you think that is? But then also, why do we have those rules in place in the first place?
So one of the things that I like to tell people is, what if, first of all, I have no animals in my house, but what if I am Jill, the cat lady, and I have 5 cats at home, and in the morning I put on my Emory scrubs and sit at home with my cats all over me and crawling all over my scrubs. And then I come in those same scrubs with cat hair all over me and cat dander. And I just go straight into the OR and perform surgery on you or your mom or your brother. And I have those same scrubs, and then cat hair starts falling off of me into the wound or onto the patient or onto the surgical bed. So that's a great example of why we don't wear our scrubs in from home. Because maybe you did launder them last night and they're freshly laundered, quote unquote. But then you sat down this morning while you drank your coffee with your pets all over you, or maybe you were taking care of your baby this morning and you were changing their diaper and you were feeding them, and now your scrubs are all contaminated. Those are the things that we can't have come in. And then you walked in and it's a high pollen count day today. And now you've got all these things all over your scrubs that now you came in and now you're going straight into the OR. Now all of that is released into the air and we've ruined the air quality. So we can't have that happen. We want to come in, we want to get the scrubs from inside the locker room and put on fresh scrubs and walk straight into the OR so that we know that there's no particles, there's no contamination, there's no pet hair, there's nothing coming off of our scrubs when we go into that OR. And the other thing that I see happen a lot are things like scrub jackets, things that aren't as readily available. So you may have a scrub machine that's regulated. You get your pair of pants and your top every day. But do you have a fresh scrub jacket every day? Because if you're just shoving your scrub jacket into your locker every day, yeah, and you put it over your freshly laundered scrubs, but you've worn that scrub jacket for 5 months, then who really cares about your fresh laundered top? So you have to make sure that you're either wearing a freshly laundered jacket or you're wearing a disposable jacket every day. Whatever you're wearing into that OR needs to be as clean as possible, and it cannot be contaminated. It cannot have been worn yesterday. If we are, prepping the patient and we want to have our arms covered. We talk about that a lot in infection prevention. It cannot be with that 5-month-old jacket that you've been wearing that you're now kind of shaking over the patient. So, looking at sterile sleeves instead, things like that. So scrubs are something that have been studied very little, which I think is what is hard when we start talking about mandating things and making sure we're doing this, making sure that we really crack down on not walking out the door with your scrubs on or walking in with your scrubs, because it is a lot of work to crack down on this policy. It just makes sense. Think about what we're talking about here. Those are very real life scenarios of people walking in with contamination on their clothes that they're now going in and doing surgery on you. And I sure don't want that. I don't want your cat hair in my surgical wound. So please change into fresh scrubs that were laundered here if you're doing surgery on me.
I agree. And I think it's something that when we put it in the perspective of what do I have on me that I could be sprinkling onto my patient via my clothing. And if we genuinely believe, like we say we do, that it's all about the patient and patient safety and the best patient experience, then something as simple as changing our scrubs when we come to work is just another way that we can make sure that we are actually providing the best environment of care for our patients, in my opinion. But I do think that hospital laundered scrubs and those provided scrubs are just another check in the block to make sure that our clothing is clean. So let's talk to then, if we talk about scrubs, now we talk about shoe covers. And shoe covers are one of those things that, you're supposed to change after every case. They don't always get changed after every case. Why do we change them?
Shoe covers kind of drive me crazy because you see them everywhere.
Yeah.
You see them in the cafeteria. You see them while the people are doing their exercise walking at lunchtime. You see them when they were walking to their cars in the evening. So what are we really trying to do with shoe covers? And there's a lot of different theories out there with shoe covers. And what I would encourage people to do is to make sure that your policy is firm, but then that you follow the policy. I've had people complain because, somebody still has their shoe covers on when they walked into the break room. Well, is that okay? That's still in the surgical services environment, but it's not okay if you're going to walk with your shoe covers on into the cafeteria. Or is it? Or is that your policy? Because if it's your policy to have your dedicated wipeable shoes in the OR, but then what, it's kind of like a reverse policy from some people where you put the shoe covers on when you walk to the cafeteria and then you take the shoe covers off and put on new shoe covers. I don't know. Everybody's policy is a little bit different. Nobody ever agrees on this one. So it's a hard one to say, this is how you have to do it. You have to wear your shoe covers in the OR, take them out in the OR, don't wear them to the cafeteria, or maybe you do need to wear them to the cafeteria so you don't bring all the cafeteria dirt and dust back to the OR. So there's a lot of different theories about how this works best. I don't know that any one is better than the other, but whatever it is, you need to write your policy and stick to it. And I see a lot of people just not sticking to whatever their policy says.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense too. And understanding that your policy is what should be dictating how you act and behave. But you do bring up a good point that I had not actually thought about before, because normally I think of shoe covers in the case, they get bloody and then the surgeon gets done and walks out to the doctor's, area to go chart, and I'm seeing bloody footprints all go down the hall, and I'm chasing him with purple wipes to go clean all the blood footprints off the floor because he didn't take his shoe covers off, in the room when he was done. But if you think about it, a lot of us are required to have shoes that are specific to the OR. So our shoes are fine, but as soon as we leave the OR, what if we have to run to the parking lot to go get something out of our car? Do we change our shoes before we leave? A lot of times we don't. We just bolt out there and come back or go into the cafeteria. So maybe that is the common sense thing, to keep our shoes actually OR specific. We do cover them when we leave, but then take those off when we come back. That's an interesting approach that I haven't heard other people do before. That's interesting.
And wipeable shoes, I think, are really the way to go. Mm-hmm. I have a pair of wipeable shoes that actually are able to be sterilized that I do too. I wear. Yeah.
Mine are hot pink.
Right. Mine are too.
Probably the same company.
Probably the same ones. Yeah. But it's not that I sterilize them every time I go into SPD or the OR, but it's just the fact that if I needed to, I could. and they are very easy to wipe. And I think that's really the way to go. I cringe when I see people that have just regular mesh tennis shoes, because a needle can fall right down into those. If you got blood spilled on those, then that there's no protection there. And I've worked in places before where those kinds of shoes are not even allowed in perioperative spaces because there's no protection from exposures and blood spills and needles falling. And so I'm surprised with shoe choices these days because there is no protection.
No, there's not. I had a surgical tech who tried to work in Crocs, and she hid them underneath like 2 layers of shoe covers. And I'm like, no, that doesn't work.
Crocs with holes?
Yeah, the Crocs with holes. I'm like, no, you can't do that.
Years ago, for those of us that were around the first wave of Crocs, Crocs were not allowed in healthcare at all. And now Crocs are back, and I see them all the time.
Yeah, I'm like, not no OR. Think about all those holes, everything that could come through that. No. But then again, look at your policy. What can you enforce, what you can't, based on your policy and the guidelines and whatnot too. Okay, so here's the last one we're going to talk about. Nice big soapbox of mine. We've actually already talked about it this season already, but I've got an infection preventionist on the other side of this microphone, so I want to hear your take on it. Scrub caps and the dreaded bouffant over the scrub cap. Let's talk about this setup and why does that get enforced like it does?
This is such a funny one for me because I used to try and enforce this one so much here because everybody has their favorite cap. A lot of people make their own. This is such a fun thing for people to make their own. But I see people wearing the same one day after day after day. I know you didn't take that home and wash it every single night.
Right?
You're taking it off, you're putting it in your locker, and you wore it again. So I know that we're not following the policy, and that's what bothers me because I know that you're wearing it day after day. And I know some people, they tell me I have 5 of them, and this one's the Monday cap, and this one's the Tuesday cap. So I know some people do follow it. And then one of my favorite anesthetists made me my own scrub cap years ago, right at the beginning of COVID. And it was with my hometown college fabric.
Oh, how nice.
And it was so special to me. And they all just loved when I wore it because they were like, oh, this is going to let us not have to cover our scrub caps anymore because she's wearing her own. And it was just so funny because that I think that was how they thought they were going to get out of it. But that's one of the biggest things is it's basically wearing dirty scrubs. It's just on your head. And that's probably the biggest concern, and we ask for the bouffant to be worn over it because of that, that very fact. And we know that you can wear a bouffant and you dispose of it. You're not going to wear that bouffant 5 days in a row. But I do feel like the scrub caps, I do think they're important because it's a way of self-expression. It's a way that people feel happy. So we can put the bouffants on over the scrub caps for the case. And then when they leave the restricted area, they can take the bouffant off. They can go to the cafeteria with their personal ones that they made on. They can go to the break room with that on if they want to. So I still feel the scrub caps have a very important place in the culture of the OR.
100%.
I've seen it. My Marshall University cap is very important to me. So I totally get it now. But I do feel like for safety, because of the behavior we've seen over time, that it is just important to cover it. I mean, it's not necessarily PPE because it's not going to, it's not,
right.
It's not water resistant. It's not going to, if you're splashed, it's not going to it's not keeping you from getting an exposure, but it is keeping any particles that were resting on that cap. It's keeping them from releasing into the air.
For sure. And that's the best argument that the hygiene argument is the best one I've heard for the reasons why we still enforce the bouffant over the cloth scrub cap, because you're right. You can't police that. You cannot guarantee that those scrub caps are being laundered every night, that they're not wearing one that like with the jacket, they've been wearing the same one for 5 months. One of my surgeons wears the same scrub cap every time he's in the OR. And I swear he just pulls it out of his locker and puts it on again. And, and I see some people at work with the same thing. It's always the same hat. And I'm like, that's not okay. So, but how can we actually enforce it? And since it is so difficult to enforce, a lot of times it's just better part of valor, right? We're going to cover it so that we know that we have a clean, protected surface. But that is a hot topic for sure, and one that gets people really up in arms very quickly.
Oh yeah. I mean, I see it all the time. People get very testy over this topic.
Yeah, my charge nurse asked me to put a bouffant over mine, I don't know, a few months ago. And I'm like, what does our policy say? And I don't think he was expecting me to ask what the policy was. But like, does our policy say I have to wear this? And lo and behold, our policy didn't. And I am one of those people who gets up in arms because I do bring in a clean scrub cap every day. I don't even keep caps in my locker. I bring a fresh one in every day and always wear a clean one. But he was not expecting the whole pushback on the policy for what we needed to wear. But I do understand why. We have people who don't wash theirs every day. And so they want them covered. And at the end of the day, it makes sense, but it is something that annoys me.
You know, I went into my SPD recently and forgot to put mine on. And my SPD educator actually challenged me and said, hey, don't forget to cover your scrub cap. And I loved it. I mean, she knew that it was I am the one that enforces it, but she told me to cover mine and I loved it.
Yeah, that's good. It's accountability and keeping us all following the same rules, because ultimately it is all patient safety. And then we're talking about PPE. It's also personal safety as well. But in this instance, this is certainly just an everybody else safety, for what we might have stuck to our cap. But Jill, the conversations always go by too quickly, but this has been enlightening and also very informative to hear from the standpoint of an infection preventionist about the different kinds of PPE and what we wear and why we wear it, or even what's going on with these rules. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here anytime.
That was Jill Holdsworth, Manager of Infection Prevention at Emory University Hospital Midtown in Atlanta, Georgia. And I really just want to remind all of you just how important it is not only to wear the appropriate PPE for whatever case or procedure that you're doing, but also to follow the rest of the rules as well. The guidelines do exist to protect our patients, but they also exist to protect us. And doing the right thing, whether it's changing your scrubs at the hospital, wearing appropriate eye protection, or removing your shoe covers when you're done with a bloody case, or following whatever shoe cover rule you may have, no matter what it is, following those guidelines will help protect you from possible exposure and risk. But that is going to do it for this week's conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in and learning alongside us as we learn from the experts. Stay tuned next week as Chris and I dive into the details of patient positioning. Don't miss it. But for now, on behalf of our whole team, thanks for listening to this week's episode of First Case.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.